Awesome. Thanks, Jake. And thank you all for facilitating the meeting. I think this is really cool. I've never been, and I've heard about this a while back, and it just kind of slipped my mind. So it's on the same, or at least the Wednesday tonight is the same night as my home group, or my old home group, really, but a meeting I still go to. But yeah, my name is Nate. I'm an alcoholic. Um, my sobriety date is March 23rd of 2015, and my home group is the Harbor Group in Fort Worth, Texas. But yeah, man, I don't know. It's just so cool to see so many people. And I just saw like that y'all been meeting since 2014. That blows my mind. That's really crazy. I Yeah, I don't know. I love the short speaker kind of format where you speak for 20 minutes or so and then you jump into discussion. That's what I grew up on in AA when I got sober in Florida. But I'll give you guys kind of a download of what happened and then what it was like and hopefully stick in what it's like now. So I grew up surprise. I grew up in Beaumont, Texas, which is down on the coast near Louisiana. Katie's on. She'll be mad at me for not talking in my Beaumont accent. It only comes out when it wants to come out, or when I've been talking to somebody else that has a really strong accent, it'll come out. But yeah, man, youngest of four kids, and you know, to keep it short, kind of the classic forgotten child, right? Like my parents raised some kids, and they just kind of assumed that the younger ones learned everything from the other ones, and they also had a lot of stuff going on, man. My parents were both raised in households where they didn't get what they needed, and they didn't have a lot to give me. They my mom was really present and really there for me up until I was probably about 9 or 10. And that was, I learned later about the time that my parents started discussing divorce and, getting further and further apart. My dad was always, kind of the cliche, punishing dad that comes home from work, after a 12-hour day and, is just angry and yells to get his point across, doesn't really know how to talk and doesn't have feelings and, all that. And when my parents got divorced, I know I took it very hard at like 12, and I really shut down. And I already before that, plenty before that, felt the thing that we talk about in AA where I felt separate, different than, everyone else knows what they're doing and I don't. And luckily now I've gotten some outside help and I've gotten a lot of amazing results from the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've gotten some outside help, because childhood emotional neglect and just neglect in general, is something that really impacted me. But yeah, my parents, I've learned to understand that they did what they could, and when they got divorced, I went, my family had always been very religious Christian, and now it was my mom lets me do whatever I want, whenever I want. Doesn't matter. She takes me to the store and she gives me $20 and she's like, get whatever food you want. And, I'm just eating ramen and drinking Dr. Pepper. And then at my dad's house, it's like my dad went from having all the answers and knowing everything to just being kind of a broken shell and, really almost just depressing. And still thinking he was right about stuff, but like, saying a lot less. But yeah, anyhow, I'll skip ahead to where I started learning how to just zone out and disconnect when I was around 12, 13. And it was because I didn't have any way to cope with what was going on. I didn't understand what was going on in my life and I knew I hated it. And so I just found ways to distract myself. I'm sure we got some Harry Potter people in here. For me, that was life, man. I found a way to escape. I didn't have to like be there. I didn't have to be in, a place where I was alone most days. I'd go to school, but then come home and not really talk to anyone. Go in my room and let TV kind of do the parenting. Um, yeah, anyway, Harry Potter, video games, TV, that's just how I distracted myself. And then when I had to go to school, it was terrible because I going at the world raw, I hadn't found alcohol yet. And so, finally, I get my first job at 16, and this was at McDonald's. So, be jealous. But I got this job, man, and my brother was 3 years older than me. He'd been working with, or he knew some of these people from high school, and I was a year behind in school. So my brother had already left school, I'm like a freshman, sophomore. And yeah, I get this job at McDonald's, man, and like these guys think I'm cool, right? Because like they know my brother, and so they let me smoke, they let me drink with them. They have a house somewhere, and and I'm suddenly like a cool 16-year-old because I do these things. And my experience with alcohol was and other substances was very quick, man. Like it instantly was. I didn't ever have a thing. I didn't have a thing. Some people like played an instrument. Some people like drew, right? There's people that like sing, or there's people that skateboard, and like, dude, I was just sitting in a room, man. And so like I found alcohol, and it was like, oh shit, like I've got a thing, man. Like this is what I'm gonna do. This is something that fills my time. And whenever I tell other people, they think I'm cool. And so it got me some of that social just like interaction that I've been craving so badly. And so yeah, man, that job was very short-lived, but it introduced me to people. And a little while later, I was living with my mom in this townhouse, and my mom had set up more of like a roommate type situation. Her and I didn't interact much. Um, but she was there, like she was there at night, right? And Um, two things happened. One, I decided that I was going to drop out of school because I thought school was a problem. I really hated it. They convinced me to do a different kind of program. They convinced me to graduate a year early, doing like a self-paced. You just do booklets, just do packets. And so that happened. And the second thing was happening. My mom started calling, and she told me, she'd basically say, "Hey, I've had a little too much to drink tonight. I can't make it home." Right. Or, "Hey, me and my boyfriend are doing something late, so I'm going to stay over at his place." And, that happened more and more until, one day she called me and she just said, "Hey, I'm going to move in with Oscar. So either you can move in with your dad, or you can, live in my house." And I'm like, "Hell yeah, I'm gonna live in your house, right? I get to live alone. Like, this is badass. This is awesome." And I tell all this story just because that's for me like the more formative thing was like I got into a position really young where I was able to do whatever I wanted whenever I wanted, pretty much, right? Like there were a lot of days when I didn't have drugs or alcohol, and those days were genuinely miserable, right? Like I had no way to deal with what was going on. I had no other solution for my life. It was just like, there's a lot of people in AA that have the story of, oh, I had this life that I built, then alcohol became a problem and I lost it, and now I want to get it back. And that's not my story at all. My story is like I started drinking, and that was the only real solution I had outside of like, books and music and video games and media. Like my whole strategy was to distract myself, and alcohol came in and was like this amazing saving grace because I could distract myself, but I could also involve other people now, and like that was this huge thing that had been missing. And I went to college for a little while. I dropped out pretty quickly. This is whenever I do a H&I when I talk to young kids, and I used to speak in schools around Florida, and like one of the things I tried to like explain that I think is so impossible, like because I know I wouldn't have heard it whenever I was a young person, but like there were just these years where like nothing happened, like nothing, like I just sat in a room most of the time, and I drank. I had this job that I didn't, I had a job sometimes, and I had some friends sometimes that kind of come and go. But there's something about like, oh, a year's gone by, like, oh, 2 years have gone by, like, oh, 3 years, it's like, and nothing's changed and like nothing's happened in your life, and you're just sort of there. And it's really soul crushing, and I got a girlfriend I got a girlfriend from a friend, like it was his girlfriend. But that was interesting, and it was just what do you have to do, right? I'm just trying to survive, man. Like that's something I feel like we don't always give ourselves credit for, is like, yeah, like I did shitty things, man, but like I was just trying to survive. Like it wasn't like I looked at my options and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna do the bad one." Like this is just the option that I had. Like I didn't know how to get affection or connection or love, and so um her and I dated for a time, and she, actually really cared about me, man. And that's what ended me up going to my first, treatment. I had been to AA meetings before, but very, very just like I literally stuck my head in the door, right? And like the first meeting where they asked me, my name, I told them a fake name because I was afraid they're gonna like track me down. I don't know. And I thought that the person at the front was the preacher. I just, I grew up in church and I really didn't like church. And so, this guy's like chairing the meeting and I'm like, oh, there he is. And then they like pass the collection basket and I'm just like, oh God, like this is the same thing. And it's just so disheartening. But she helped me the first time I went to rehab was just for her. It was like, and it wasn't even for her. It was so that she would stop, like, hey, I need you to not bug me so much about my drinking, right? Like, because this is going to happen. Like, I don't even know why you're making such a big deal because this isn't going anywhere. It was like, it wasn't really a consideration. And when I got back from my first rehab, there was this year-long period where I went to some meetings and then I didn't go to meetings, and I went to some meetings and I didn't go to meetings. And the girl ended up leaving for very good reason. It was like I decided I would go back to treatment, and this began this this long period of treatment for me. I went to rehab a lot, and man, I've got a lot of good things to say about rehab. I really do. At the time that I went to treatment, there was this revolving door sort of system where if you in Florida, which is where I went to treatment, I could go to treatment and then I could relapse and go back to treatment, right? Like, so I moved to Florida after 30 days in treatment, and I'm basically living in Florida with no knowledge of anything in Florida, right? And so I only live in this rehab. And so at like 83 days, I relapsed for the first time because I'm just horribly depressed. And, that's something I struggled with was I was just horrible depression. For my entire life, man. I mean, I really, suicide was always on the table, and it was on the table actually into sobriety, which fortunately for a couple years now, it's not been a thought, which is amazing. Um, but no, in Florida, I guess what I'll say just to like kind of, I promised I would talk about my relapses, by the way. People love hearing about my relapses in Florida. I don't know why. But it's living in a rehab in a halfway house like type situation. This place was really interesting. So it was like they've got this huge apartment complex. There's hundreds of people that are living in this treatment center, and like it was a step down level of care. So like you're in detox, then you're an inpatient, then you're in PHP, then you're in IOP 7, then you're in IOP 3, then you go to the halfway house, then you go to the three-quarter house, then you go to the sober living, right? And so like I'm somewhere in here whenever I relapse, and I relapsed a bunch, and sometimes I relapsed on, Kava or Kratom. Sometimes it was Air Duster, right? Like I worked at Harbor Freight for a little while, and I passed out like in the store, and they're like, "What happened?" I'm like, "Oh, I was really tired." And then sometimes it got a lot worse, man. Like they talk about drinking getting worse, and I just, it's like I can't escape anymore, man. Like I started to drink, and this is already like the progression of this had happened, but I stopped drinking, right? And then like now it's every time I drink, I can't actually get that relief. I can't actually feel it. I can scratch, I can touch it. It's like almost there. Like I'm almost free, I'm almost drunk, and then I get alcohol poisoning. And that started to happen. I'd gotten alcohol poisoning and hospitalized like once in Texas, and then in Florida it happened 5 times within the span of a year, within the span really of like 6 months actually. And then my last time out, I had a little bit of time sober. I got like 5 months, and I had done a little bit of step work, right? I'd started doing some step work, which was really cool, and I'd seen that it was starting to work, but I stopped doing it. I didn't want to do my amends, right? And so um in a 6-day period, I got alcohol poisoning in the parking lot of rehab, which was the second time that had happened to me. And then, um, excuse me, I overdosed on a substance that I let just some random person inject into me because I didn't care anymore. I mean, like I just didn't have the ability to care about myself. And, I had done some step work, like I said. And so this time in treatment, I've been to that rehab a lot. And one of the things they did was they always asked you like, hey, what's going to be different this time? And You know, it was really good that they did that, and I always had an answer. I'm a talker, man. I can talk, trust me. Like, and anyone that knows me in here knows, right? Like, I'm happy to talk to you about stuff. And back then it was a lot worse because I didn't have any, I just had like the protect me kind of feeling. I didn't have like morals that I lived by. And yeah, so they gave me that question of what are you going to do different this time? And I just like didn't have an answer. I had no idea. I don't know. I don't know. I'm out of options, man. I don't know what to do. I'm not, genuinely came to that just point of like, I surrender, I give up. I'm sitting in the same room in this rehab that I've been in before, and I literally just put my hands up and I laughed, because I was like, I give up. I don't know what to do. And I really wish like I knew what the difference is in that moment, like what flips that switch for people. But I got a sponsor, man. I had a new sponsor, started doing some step work, and the thing that my sponsor really hammered into me, there's two things. And the main thing that I remember and just talk about a lot now is just that I am not somebody's life coach. I'm not in charge. I don't tell people who they should be with, what they should do with their life, how they should. I'm there to give them the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my sponsor did that to me without his opinion, because there's this book, right, that just shows us like, how do I get sober? I need to get sober. I need to learn to find a way to live, and like, so he showed me the instructions on how to live, and he didn't tell me what he thought about things. Hey, what should I do about this? And he'd be like, well, let's go to the book. Let's do some step work on it, right? Like, man, I'm angry at this person. He didn't tell me like, he told me, okay, cool, let's do some inventory on it. Let's write down what's wrong and like let's do something about it. And yeah, anyway, so no opinions. And the second thing was sponsorship, right? Like I got sober, I've been gifted this life, right? It's not like I get sober and like, oh, I guess I could put a little bit of time into, giving people the program back. I guess I could put a little bit of time into sponsorship. It's just and I just went through working with others with somebody yesterday, man, and it's pretty clear. It's like, hey, this is supposed to be inconvenient. This is not, I don't sponsor people whenever I could make a little time for, no, I was dying of a terminal illness. I found a solution to that illness. And what's really cool is like that solution of sponsoring people is what keeps me sober. So I do need it, right? Like I need it. But it's not like, oh, I do it if I have the time. This is what my time, this is the number one priority, and I'm not perfect in any way. I hope it doesn't sound like I'm moralizing because it's like, dude, I'm a freaking person, man. And like I've had times in sobriety where I got very selfish, very depressed. I've had times, like I mentioned, right, like suicidal ideation came back, and I had to learn like, the things that I didn't learn in my childhood. And I'm still learning those. It's not like over, a lot of times I think that it's so easy to act like, oh yeah, I used to be dishonest. Oh yeah, I used to do this. It's like, dude, I'm still here. And the book is pretty clear about, like in the 10th step, it's like, as time passes, these things will get better. As time passes, I will get more and more on this plane of inspiration and hearing from my higher power, right? Less and less, I'll be concerned with myself. And like service, whenever I moved from Florida to Texas at 5 years sober, it was right when COVID was really kicking off. That's the reason I moved back. And I was really fortunate. I fell ass backwards into a host committee for the Texas State Conference for young people in AA. The committee was in their second year because of COVID, and so instead of hosting in 2020, they hosted in 2021, and it really changed. I had such a stick up my ass, man. I went to the Texas Quarterly Conference, which is a really small young people's meeting, and I mean, people were like dancing on their chairs for the sobriety countdown, and I was like, don't y'all know this is serious? Like I didn't say that, but I'm like thinking it. And I couldn't understand. I couldn't see it. And it took me a little while to understand that like, man, I can have like a serious disposition towards recovery and live it, breathe it, like do what I can to actually, help the newcomer and have fun and dance on a chair, and now 4 years later, we're getting to host TXSCYPAA again. And I won't like shamelessly, harp on coming or anything, but being a part of a committee like that and watching people and also being part like me learning stuff, like learning stuff and then getting to watch newcomers get plugged in a way where they're contributing, right? Like they're contributing, they're learning skills, like just communication, dude. Like it's like we have to, we're alcoholics, so we get to argue and come out on the other side of that, right? Like, but we're arguing about how to help the newcomer best, right? Like we're like we get really passionate about it because we care about the same thing. And I'm sorry, I forgot about the topic. I need to do that now, right? Yeah. So the topic I wanted to bring is on page 85, the first full paragraph. and it reads, it is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. And there's a lot of things that can come out of that paragraph, but the thing that I'd love to hear about is what things do you have to do to keep the 12 steps working for you on a daily basis? So thanks for letting me share.